On May 2nd, I released a video focusing on the Ultimate Universe line of comics from 2024. I was massive on these books. Dennis Camp's Ultimates, Pete Momoko's Ultimate X-Men, Jonathan Hickman's Ultimate Spider-Man on a good day are all amazing books that I adored when making this video, and still do. Look, Black Panther was okay. I think the back half is really good, but man, that first half is something. But anyways, this video is very important to me because for the first time, I really felt that my video reached an audience and broke 10,000 views, which in the long run is pretty small, but for me, that's 10,000 more people that watched it than I thought would. It really gave me the motivation to keep making videos because, hey, people might actually like this. So I should look back on it quite fondly, right? It has haunted me for literal years. I guess it's more like months, but look. Have you ever had a take so awful, no good, just downright bad, and you decide to broadcast it to thousands of people, so for the rest of the time, everyone now knows you are an idiot? Quite literally the first thing you see before even clicking on the video. That take being Ultimate Wolverine. And let me tell you, I was a ride or die for this book. I remember being on Twitter and absolutely defending this book tooth and nail because I thought just maybe this book will get better. I thought it was a really promising setup. Seeing Wolverine almost this force of nature slasher villain as the Winter Soldier was a cool idea. As well, it was supposed to expand on the Eurasian territory of the Makers Council, something that really wasn't explored until now. And if it's anything like the Ultimates and Ultimate X-Men, where there's commentary rooted deep in the culture of America and Japan, and seeing how they could do the same for Russia would be really interesting to me. But then, slowly, after issue, it dawned on me. I don't think I really like this. Now, I think before I really delve deep into this book, issue by issue, I think it's an important aspect of why I felt so disappointed by Ultimate Wolverine was everything that was surrounding it. When this book was announced, the Ultimate Universe was still this new big thing. The Absolute Universe was just getting started, Hickman's Spider-Man was absolutely beloved, but people were excited to see more from the Ultimates line, and with the announcement of Ultimate Wolverine, it also opened the door for more ongoing to the Ultimate Universe if it was successful. Surely, right? But there were already problems even during the announcement. As from the Free Comic Book Day issue of the Ultimates, we saw what was seemingly the remains of Logan in the Maker's trophy room. For all intents and purposes, the Wolverine we knew was dead, but now he was seemingly resurrected without an explanation. Up until this moment, the Ultimate Universe was a pretty tight-knit story that didn't really have any conflicting continuity, so for the line that prides itself on that, seeing them walk back a decision as major as killing off one of their most premier characters was jarring to say the least. As well, let's not kid ourselves. For as much as I love Pete Momoko's X-Men, the first thing I would call it is unconventional. Instead of being this classic superhero romp that we see in 616, it took the core themes of the X-Men and reinterpreted them and used the metaphor to explore themes regarding the treatment of women, the queer community, and religion in Japanese culture, making them her own. Something that I think what makes these universes like the Ultimates and the Absolute line so special, having a creator's own spin on these iconic characters. It's kind of apparent from the onset this was made as a way to reel in readers who were more willing to read a more familiar book that resembled 616 than anything that the Ultimate Universe was offering. Somewhat antithetical to the whole line's ideas of rejecting the past and by parading these characters that, oh, if you miss the X-Men you know and love, why not pick up this book to really see where they are? But I want to reiterate, I came into this book absolutely wanting to love it. I wanted to cherish it like I do with most of the other Ultimate comics because I genuinely believed that an alternate continuity is just what the big two needs, something where bold creative decisions can take place. but each decision introduces something that almost works. There are fragments of an idea that almost seems cohesive to a better whole, but as the issues rolled in, the series never evolved these ideas. I thought this book would deepen our understanding about how mutants are treated under the Maker's Council, but instead flattened them as merely aesthetics to gawk at with barely any real substance. The book's trajectory makes that painfully clear even from its first issue. An aircraft flies over the border of the Eurasian Republic. Stars and snow riddle the sky as soldiers pass the time by chattering. You think you can hear us? Why don't you ask? I'm not asking him nothing. Creeps me out. They look over at their living weapon with fear-struck eyes, barely able to stand looking at him. They continue talking about the mutant that stands before them, but only at a mere whisper, terrified he can hear them. Rumors about the Winter Soldier fill the room, though quickly interrupted as silence cuts through the room as the Winter Soldier rises, unreacting to the others, opening up the cargo ramp, and without muttering a single sentence, jumps without hesitation, but a thought runs through his head. A faint memory that should have been forgotten like the rest of his identity. He sees himself bloody, his entire lower half gone. The same soldiers who were on the cargo ship follow close behind him, but rather than being begrudging allies, they heckle him, calling him a dog of the opposition. His mind is rattled with fear, desperately trying to get away. But before long, the final words he hears are, "Sokolov, tell me, what do you do with an injured dog?" You shoot it, followed by a clicking of a pistol, as the memory of a long-gone life is interrupted as he tumbles through the sky and crashes, slicing through the door, cracking his neck, ready to put down any opposition scum. Two mutants see the beast at the doorway. Kurt is hesitant, believing he's seen a familiar face stand right in front of them, but Raven immediately orders her men to open fire. Relentlessly, the Winter Soldier cuts down the opposition, and soon after chases Raven in a corner. As a last-ditch attempt, she disguises herself as one of the Eurasian Public's leaders, but the facade holds no water, and after a quick clash, she meets the same fate as the rest of the opposition will. Kurt, watching afar, is filled with terror, reciting a prayer as he picks up a rifle, and after begging the Lord to forgive him for what he must do, rattles off shot after shot, teleporting around, but once again and is impaled by the claws of the beast. Looking deep into his eyes, he sees a man. No, a friend that was once thought dead, his name Logan, and pleads to him that if he's still in there, all he can hope is that he forgives that they weren't quick enough to save him. That he always knew he was alive and hoped one day they would meet once more. Slouching over, passes away shortly after. Unreacting to the carnage around him, Logan walks out of the doors of the church, and the final page of the issue is him looking down at the mask. Blood flows where tears should, as all he knows now is carnage. This first issue, it's still really cool. I remember exactly why I defended this book all the way when it got started. Cancel me, but this is a really good setup for Ultimate Wolverine. We're given a glimpse of how the Eurasian Republic is led. We see the Rasputins talk, the mutant opposition working from the shadows, always on the back foot of collapse. Seeing an Ultimates book from the perspective of the Maker's Council is something that I thought was needed to flesh out its villains, and seeing it from their tool is an added bonus. I thought one of the best issues was the 1 year in issue where we follow Nick Fury, leading the organization hand essentially the Maker's Gestapo, and how he breaks from all the dirty work he had to do to maintain order, mirroring his 616 counterpart, but instead of for the greater good, it was for the Maker's version of that greater good. And the tragedy lies in how he was all in all the simple tool for the government, that this wasn't the first time he turned heel and tried revolting against his master, doomed to always fail, destined to repeat this awful cycle. And I think if Chris Condon actually kind of leaned into this, Ultimate Wolverine could have been that ongoing from the point of view of the villains. I really enjoyed how he was simulating this force of nature that was only known by rumors from his fellow soldiers, playing up this idea of the Winter Soldier being this unfeeling force of nature, kind of similar to the shape from Halloween. A brooding figure who chases down his targets without ever feeling a single ounce of anything, not even taking a second to bask in the carnage, all while building up the opposition and giving a glimpse of how mutants displacement worked in the Ultimate Universe, something that we only heard about in the Ultimates, never shown. It could also show how uphill the fight for the other teams are inevitably going to be to face off, how dire the circumstances are that even if the X-Men can't stand a chance at the Maker's Council, could really add to the stakes to the rest of the line, show how important their fight truly is and how special the other books are. Not to say this first issue is perfect by any means, I don't like how the Rasputins only really exist to give exposition, besides hand-waving the retcon for the original Wolverine's death, saying that, oh, that was a part of experiment, haha, don't worry about it too much. Also, I would complain about killing off well-known characters like Nightcrawler and Mystique, or a cheap way to build tension in these books, but look, half this universe is based off that anyway, so I don't care too much. Though, I do think it's a little silly that the guy whose main ability is literally to teleport away did the exact opposite of running away, but I really think Kondon set up to what would be an interesting premise if there was enough follow through with the idea, which, we'll get to that. But first, I just want to say thank you so much for the support as of late. It's been crazy to see how much my channel has been growing, and if you just want to take a moment to like, subscribe, and comment what I should cover next, I would greatly appreciate it. Anyways, thank you so much, and let's get back to the video. The next couple of issues take a different approach. Instead, we see the inner conflict of the Eurasian Republic. Frankly, they don't trust the project even after 4 successful missions. They think their brainwashing has been losing its grips on Logan's mind as their telepaths are detecting Logan having memories slowly drip back into his mind. They want to test his loyalty to the Republic. How do they do that? Is he sent to fight a high-level mutant to get another look at the opposition so we can see how dire the situation is? Hell, maybe he can even fight one of the many other experiments the Republic has been working on. 10 random guys. He just fights 10 random guys, and I think we met them in the first issue, but we didn't even see their faces, so I don't know why we care. We really only learned their names at the end of the issue. Yeah, the drop in quality from the first issue is rather sharp, to be entirely honest with you. This doesn't even move the plot at all compared to what was set up, and doesn't tell us anything new. We already knew that the Rasputins didn't trust the Weapon X program, that the Wolverine has been slowly leaking back into his mind. These aren't revelations, these are just reiterating what was already set up, just an issue before. I at least cared about Kurt and Raven because I already knew who they were from 616. Granted, not because the book did anything to make me care for them, but hey, I kind of felt something. While when Komarov R is taken out, I don't really feel much at all. Cool, he got a guy with a gun. Not like he hasn't done that before. Hell, they even reiterate the whole urban legend part of the Winter Soldier, but they don't do anything with it. It's just more of the same without doing a whole lot else. Which, when you only have 12 issues to tell your story, is a bit of a problem. That is valuable time that you should be spending trying to convey your message, rather than restating the basis of it. Which, sadly, is still a common flaw with the following issue. In issue 3, we pick up following everyone's favorite Cajun, Gambit, followed close by his sign as always, Kitty Pryde. Sorry, Chris, Grogue's too busy being Japanese, so just throw in a random girl with brown hair. That'll work. Which isn't even really that weird. Look, both Gambit and Kitty have graduated to the nebulous 30-something of X-Men ages, so it's not a weird age gap thing. It's just odd. Tell me a ship that has less chemistry than these two. But anyways, they meet this version of Black Widow who defected from the Republic and has joined the opposition, acting as their getaway driver. But close by is the Winter Soldier and a band of troops following close by. But they stop, seeing flickering lights in the tunnel. Chess pieces. Oh, Gambit chess. Chris, you're a funny little guy, aren't you? Wolverine doesn't find play on words very funny and tosses one of the soldiers onto the makeshift mine and it sizzles. His final words being, "Oh fuck," before erupting in a blast of flamboyant kinetic energy. The opposition hears that the beast is on the hunt once more, closing in on their location. Remy and Kitty prepare to get away as Natasha gets behind the wheel, struggling to get it started, but before they can take off, the Winter Soldier cuts down the door, tearing through the opposition like it was nothing. Natasha burns rubber and makes a mad dash while the Winter Soldier is on hot pursuit and shortly catches up to face off with Kitty Pryde, pleading with Logan, but he lunges at her, but of course faces right through her, and she is able to peer into his mind, desperately trying to bring out his former self as memories of a lifelong gong flash before him in an amazing page from artist Cappuccio, which does nothing for me. Look, this would be a really powerful moment 5 issues from now. It doesn't really do much, it just once again reiterates what we already know about Logan. It really only establishes that Kitty Pryde knows that Logan is still alive. Maybe Condon could have given us a little bit more details on how he ended up in this state from the first issue, because he has expressed interest in making a prologue that followed the opposition, but I feel that if we didn't spend so much time restating what we already know, we could have explored these ideas. Hell, we learned that Gambit and Hank McCoy were responsible for the assassination of Mikhail Rasputin, and you can't tell me you don't want to see Beast make an IED, and you could still have Wolverine be in the issue trying to stop it but failing, leading to the project being brought into question. Because a lot of the opposition and even character motivation is relegated to walls of text acting as diegetic lore, which works for Nightcrawler because Condon didn't have much plans for him. But when these characters are supposed to play larger roles, I feel that panels should be dedicated to them rather than just Logan standing there. Hell, for a line so focused on having as little editorial interference, giving creators the freedom to explore new concepts, Will Moss, the editor for the Ultimates line, had to nudge Chris Condon in that direction for exploring his villains, because for the most part, they only exist to be scary Russians, and we only get a slight peek at their motivations in the back end of issue 2, that Magic is apparently jealous of Logan, I guess. When there's so much we could explore with the concept of Colossus and Magic being part of the Maker's Council, how mutants are facing their own kind of displacement and how they have to justify it. But now, because we spend so much time treading on ideas already presented, we don't get that, which unfortunately this problem continues in issue 4. Where we have these scientists try to mind control Logan after the events of the previous issue, and we're just opposed to this imagery of these wolves and bears, which is weird to say because I really don't know what it's trying to convey at all. It hasn't shown up before and doesn't really add to the dialogue that's presented throughout the issue, and it doesn't reappear to my knowledge. Then it hits me. This is just one big reference to the story Weapon X, which is so frustrating to read as it echoes a larger problem with this book. That Chris Condon is so unwilling to do anything original with his version of Ultimate Wolverine, only rehashing ideas that have already been proven to themselves to work in the comics medium, something that even Ultimate Invasion, the basis of the entire universe, makes a meta joke about this, where Kang has an army of clones that resembles the original Ultimate Universe, to show that these are new ideas confronting the old, that this universe prides itself on the idea accepting that the past is long dead, but their legacy, their ideals, can be carried on by a new generation. Other runs in the Ultimate Universe oozes with the influences that are outside of the Marvel Universe. Just look at the Ultimates, where Camp took inspiration from books like Planetary and Global Frequency, using those ideas and blend them together in the Marvel formula, making a wholly unique idea where you just mash together a Wolverine story in a Wolverine story. Guess what you get? A Wolverine story that just feels like it was from 616 and not much else to offer. It doesn't help that only focusing on Wolverine only covers half of the book's premise. In all the interviews from Chris Condon I was able to find, he never mentioned reading anything or taking inspiration from the Winter Soldier, where I thought there was so much squandered potential in that alone. The Winter Soldier was an assassin who would be periodically brought back from stasis to take out high political targets, and thought that could really lend itself well and explore the history of 6160, similar to how Ultimates 2 did, and we can see how the Republic used Logan as a way to shape their territory, but also used him against other territories, because in Ultimate Invasion, despite their non-aggression pact, their Eurasian Republic was considered a rogue state. We could have a deeper look at the political landscape and give conflict within the council. You could blend these two elements of the Winter Soldier and Wolverine and get something that expands 6160. Maybe Chris Condon could have taken inspiration from Warren Ellis's Moon Knight run, where each issue focuses on Moon Knight doing an entirely different job and each issue is self-contained. We could have seen that in Ultimate Wolverine, where Logan takes on different jobs. But yes, issue 5 is probably my favorite issue of the book after the first one, because genuinely it's a radically different take on Victor Creed, as we see him nurture children mutants by giving them Shirley Temples and telling them stories about him and Logan. Here we have a variation of a character that we couldn't possibly have in 616. Also, it helps build this background for Logan, and we have a certain level of drama because we have someone who had a connection to him genuinely react for what has happened to Logan, and that Victor failed him by not holding up his end of the deal and killing him if he ever got caught. It establishes that something that can be resolved later on. Thankfully, the issue after the Winter Soldier is defeated by Black Widow and Victor, they take him directly to the opposition, where we actually get to meet a cool version of David Howler, as it makes perfect sense someone as powerful as him would be near the top of the Maker's shit list, but due to how powerful he is, he grows beyond death that helps break Logan out of his mind control, showing that despite everything he's not a tool, but a person who will lead the fight against their oppressors, waking up to familiar faces. And this is where it dawned on me: I really don't like this book. 6 missions. The Winter Soldier went on a total of 6 missions before having his mind control reverted and him going back to Logan. I think it's an absolute tragedy to immediately strip Logan of his Winter Soldier status barely halfway through the book, robbing us of so many potential plot points for what? Another X-Men story where, mutants are constantly on the back foot of entire annihilation. We certainly haven't seen that one before. As much as I really like it when Chris Condon tries to get out of his comfort zone, it's too far and few between issues, and while they're set up, Condon doesn't do a whole lot with his ideas. Legion just ends up possessing a Sentinel and is Logan's personal fast travel device, and Sabretooth just kinda leaves the story while the rest of the side cast. I wanted to look at 616 Gambit and 6160's Gambit and tell what's the actual difference between these characters. All in all, he's essentially just the same, and the only characterization we get him is him flirting with Kitty. He isn't even the biggest offender of this. I mean, really, this literally looks like a carbon copy of Beast. There's no significant difference that justifies him being here. They don't have enough time to really establish or separate them from their mainline counterparts, or to really care about them when they're eventually killed off. The entire emotional through line is predicated upon how much of a connection you already have with these characters from other comics, which would be fine for a mainline story with these decades-long worth of build-up and stories for these characters, but the Ultimate Universe doesn't have that luxury. Why is this version of Jean having her autonomy removed supposed to be provocative? You can't just hope I already have a connection to these characters to do all the heavy lifting. The book should use what we already know and lay the groundwork. I think a perfect comparison is, funnily enough, Camp's version of Doctor Doom. We're introduced to this version in Ultimate Invasion number 3, where Howard Stark awakens, rattled in the Maker's laboratory, an endless expanse, and is greeted by a familiar figure. But instead of being this egomaniac, underneath that metal shell is the face of Reed Richards, but he's something entirely else. He's neither the Reed or Victor we know him as. He's a broken man, a shell of his former self. We are not shown exactly what happened to him, but using the knowledge of 616 draws us in and uses that as the basis of our intrigue, but is interesting enough on its own right. Camp uses what was set up by Hickman and explores him deeper with the Ultimates issue number 4, despite how little time they have and how we already know what their fate will be going into the book. We see their relationship, show how much they mean to Reed, how the Maker gaslit Reed into thinking this was all his fault, and that broke him. Despite all of that, throughout the series, Camp was able to use this as not only an emotional throughline, but the groundworks of Doom's development. We see how he reacts when his second family, the Ultimates, are about to meet their end. He risked the entire annihilation of the universe just to save them, and tries blaming himself for their shortcomings. But Iron Lad is there to back him up. Despite this constant feeling of loss that something should be there, Reed is able to grow because despite everything that the Maker has done to him to bury it, Reed's willpower will always blossom no matter how much tragedy you put him through. He's able to create the future foundation and honor the future that was once taken from him. I say that Ultimate Doom is comparable to Ultimate Wolverine in the sense that they both use mass strategy to set up their character's growth, but while Camp is able to fully explore his character of Reed Richards, this version of Logan has fragments of an idea forming, mainly how he feels immense guilt for what happened to Nightcrawler and Mystique. They don't take the time rebuilding that connection, they just kinda wave it off and excuse Logan for the murders he did commit, whether mind controlled or not. And before anything is able to be developed, all his friends are just killed off. Condon actively chooses for Logan to immediately move on from his guilt of losing everyone and murdering his comrades, only letting Logan say he feels guilty that people judge him for his past rather than showing it. I am seriously asking if I'm supposed to feel anything but roll my eyes when they made Cyclops a Sentinel. Not to say that I think every comic should have deep thematic storytelling, but I think when you're trying to convey that message, I feel that's when it becomes a problem. As a writer, Chris Condon ends up becoming his biggest enemy because he gets so lost in blatantly paying homage to the works that inspired him rather than using them as a vehicle to express his message. I think why this run is so fascinating because I feel that it's always so easy to say, oh, it's all on editorial, oh, the editorial wanted this, that they didn't see Peach Momoko's vision for her X-Men and went around and undermined her, but oddly enough, Chris Condon talks very little about any editorial oversight. In fact, it seems the opposite to be the case. In podcasts, he talks about how editorial essentially gave him complete and utter freedom, saying that with the Wolverine being dead since the beginning, he had the choice. Then he would go on to say that he couldn't see anyone else being Wolverine, so he went with Logan anyways, expressing this notion even further in later interviews. And I think that is the root problem with the entire book. Chris Condon loves the X-Men too much. He seems to pick and choose his favorites. Even he admitted himself, which from a reader's perspective, mind you, feels that Condon was too scared to leave his comfort zone. That instead of doing this new original take with the characters, drifted to what he was mostly familiar with and only focused on that. Because anytime there was a sense of originality, it was pushed away to be forgotten about. There wasn't any editorial muddling. It was a conscious choice by Chris Condon, seemingly at every turn that something happens to differentiate itself from already existing works, it takes the path of least interesting. Ultimately, I think this book is just frustrating. It's a book full of ideas that almost work, moments that almost say something, and a premise that almost justifies its existence in a universe built on reinvention, but instead of using its brutality to deepen those ideas, the series lets the violence become the point. Ultimate Wolverine isn't afraid to be extreme, it's afraid to be different. Then this book stands as a reminder that loving these characters isn't enough. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do with them isn't to make them louder, bolder, or harsher. It's to actually let them change.